we've been using Q as output, and we want to continue that. But this is market output. Remember, we had a demand curve and showed how much people want to buy for gasoline, for example. And this was the demand for gasoline, and that's the total market demand for gasoline. If you tell me gasoline is now about $2 a gallon, we can see how much people will buy. We know that the price of gasoline goes up to $3. People are going to buy a little bit less, but because it's inelastic, they're not going to buy too much less. You can read these different values off of this demand curve, and it's market. Okay? We're going to introduce lowercase q, and lowercase q is going to denote the output of a single firm in the industry. In other words, we're going to think at the firm level about production decisions, knowing that we're looking at just one firm, and later we'll aggregate up those firms and we'll get the market output, capital Q. So capital Q is the sum of all the activity of the firms that are in there, and we'll have to learn a lot more about how that happens as we go forward. But today we're going to introduce lowercase q, and we're going to think about the output of an individual firm. And that output comes from something we call a production function. And the production function says, look, there's some function where when you feed inputs in, outputs come out. That function is this infamous F operator. It's just right now some abstraction. It's some complex polynomial that says take all these inputs and put them in, and the engineers will tell you put the different inputs into this complex polynomial, and they can tell you how many outputs you're going to get. We're going to make life a little bit easier for us, and we're going to assume that there's only two inputs right now. That's not a bad assumption at all. We know, in fact, there may be many more inputs, but we can aggregate the inputs into two categories, because two is important to me because economists like to do a lot of two-dimensional graphs. So it's a good thing to have the world simplified down to two. These two inputs are going to be called labor, which we'll call L, and capital, which we'll call K. Economists use K for capital because C is typically already taken by costs. Okay, so we'll use K for capital in this situation. And that means that Q is equal to a function of labor and capital. Okay, this is what we call a production function. Here in town, in Champaign-Urbana, we are privileged to be the home of the largest craft manufacturing facility in the United States. Out on the western side of Champaign is this craft plant. They make macaroni and cheese here. They're Kraft's sole source for Velveeta. They make mayonnaise. There's all sorts of stuff going on out there. Now imagine if you and I got in a hot air balloon and we sort of floated over that Kraft plant. When we got near the Kraft plant, we'd see this big parking lot, and there'd be lots of cars there. Okay? And then there's this big thing called a factory. Okay? And on the parking lot, workers are getting out of their cars and they're strolling into the factory. We don't see them once they get in the factory. We just see the roof. But there's a big factory there. And over here is a loading dock where trucks are backing up and unloading eggs and pasta and glass jars and paper labels and all sorts of stuff that are going in there. And again, we don't see them. They're under the roof, but there's stuff going in. And at the back, that's the place the Kraft shareholders like. That's where the shipping docks are. And they've got these big trucks backed in there, and they're loading them with jars of mayonnaise and cases of macaroni and cheese, and they're going out. Now, to an economist, that's all I really need. I got the data now. I see the inputs coming in. I see the outputs coming out. Now, engineers, they want more. They want to see inside. They want to do all these sorts of things, and that's good. We need them to figure out what that F operator is. But as an economist, we pretty much got enough data now to actually figure out what the production function looks like. We see all the inputs coming in. We see the outputs coming out. Let's see if we can figure out what this thing is all about. I need to bring in a definition here. And the definition is about something called the short run and something called the long run. And from now on, I'm not going to write this out. It's going to be SR and LR. And the short run is essentially the period of time in which at least one input, in this case we only have two, so one input is fixed. And the long run is the period of time in which all inputs are variable. So continuing with our story about the Kraft plant. The Kraft plant's got a big pile of brick and mortar out there. That's what economists call capital. I know some of you think the Wall Street Journal says capital is actually the cash on hand and stuff like that. To an economist, when we see K or capital, we mean factors of production, brick and mortar. For my little example earlier of the Larry's tree trimming service, the capital was a chainsaw. The labor was me. Okay? So all firms have some inputs that are capital and some inputs that are variable, or labor. In this case, the short run is the period of time when at least one of those is fixed. If you're running that craft plant on the edge of town and you're going out to work and people are saying, hey, it's almost Thanksgiving, we need more mayonnaise. Well, you can't change the capital to start running an extra run for mayonnaise. Now you can change the labor. You can ask some of the workers, who wants to work 4 hours of overtime tonight because we need more mayonnaise? You can vary labor quickly, okay? That's a short run decision. But you can't vary capital in the short run. Now you can build capital, and in fact, Kraft has added onto that plant 10 consecutive years. You drive by there, you see they're putting a new wing on. Well, that wing is being built, okay? When that wing finally comes to fruition and gets used, that's the long run. So if you ask me how long is the long run, it's not like 90 days or 180 days or 3. It depends on how fast you can change your capital. If you're a ditch digger, your capital is a shovel and your labor. And if you want to increase that, well, you can probably change your capital in 20 minutes. Drive out to the Home Depot and buy a new shovel, okay? If you're running a hot dog stand on the corner, you can probably change your capital in 3 days. Express delivery from Amazon for another stainless steel hot dog cart right there. If you're building a new refinery, well, it's estimated it takes a little over 3.5 years from the time you break ground till you get a drop of usable gasoline out of that refinery. It's a very complex piece of capital equipment. So there's no fixed time for this capital. We just know in our heads that there's a period of time where I can't really change the brick and mortar. The fixed part I have is really fixed. I can vary my labor. In this case, with the Kraft plant, when I vary labor, that's a proxy for also varying the number of eggs and the number of glass jars. Those are things that all I can move quickly. Capital, no, it's a long-run decision.